Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Harrison Griffin, and on behalf of our team here at Carahsoft, I would like to welcome you to our Databricks webinar, the Data Intelligence Platform for Higher Education. Carahsoft is the trusted government IT solutions provider. As a top-performing ITAS SW2 and SEWP contract holder, Carahsoft has served as Databricks master distributor and aggregator for the public sector. Working as strategic partners and through a robust ecosystem of value-added channel partners and system integrators, Carahsoft delivers Databricks solutions to federal, state, and local government agencies, as well as the education community, supporting the public sector's mission to prepare for the digital future and modernizes approaches to IT through the application of open source solutions. I'll now pass it over to Sarah Jewers from our sales team.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sarah Jers, and I'm a sales representative on our Databricks team here at Carahsoft. I'd like to welcome you to today's Databricks webinar. If you have any questions after the event, please do not hesitate to reach out directly to me via the information displayed on your screen or to our Carahsoft team, whose information will be provided at the end of the presentation as well. Today, Databricks and Kovexa will discuss the wide range of use cases you can realize with the Databricks Data Intelligence Platform, from traditional reporting and analytics to support for the most forward-looking artificial intelligence applications. They will also delve into a number of higher education use cases with the Databricks Data Intelligence Platform. And now I'm going to pass it over to Andrew Ko to introduce our speakers.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Appreciate it. And always, Harrison, always a pleasure to be on these webinars. As a quick introduction, my name is Andrew Ko. I'm the Managing Director for Kovexa. We're a boutique advisory consulting and investment company focused in on education, both higher ed as well as K through 12 globally. Today's topic, Data Intelligence Platform for Higher Education, was not necessarily a new particular topic. However, with a lot of the advent of the AI and many of the data becoming now much more relevant than even before, we're really excited to present today our panelists who will be talking through many of the actual core issues, but also some of the areas of how to even really harness the power of the data that you have as within your institutions. The unique approach today that I also think is very different is we want to take the approach of the voice of the customer. It's having some two prominent former CIOs within the education, higher education market, brings a lot of approach that not just about technology, but also a lot of the old operational, organizational challenges when it comes to data. So we encourage you to definitely listen in, lots of questions, and definitely walk away with that white paper that will be published at the end for you to abstract, download, and read. We also want to make sure that data, while it's not an old topic, it is modernized, as I mentioned, when it comes to the world of AI. And so I'm also delighted to hand over the reins for our moderator and co-moderator with Rob Reed and Karen Biza. And so if I may ask you to come on in and hand it over, I appreciate it and hope you all enjoy the webinar.
Thanks, Andrew. It's great to be here. Hi, everyone. My name is Karen Biza-Turlo, and I'm part of the Databricks University Alliance program here at Databricks. And I'm joined by my colleague, Rob Reed, who's waving. Hi, it's great to be here and moderating this panel for you all. We've got a lot of awesome questions for Mike and Bruce. So let's hand it over to Mike and Bruce. If you can please do a quick introduction.
Hi, this is Michael Berman here, and I worked for many years as a CIO mostly at public institutions. Most recently as the CIO for the Cal State system, where we had a very large implementation of PeopleSoft and a large data lake that we built in the cloud. And so in the last couple of years, I've been consulting, and I got a chance to learn about Databricks and see what they're doing. And speaking for me, it just solved so many of the problems that I faced over the last 25 years in higher education and managing data. I was extremely impressed by the capabilities of what it can do. So I'm fascinated to see how it's being applied to higher education. So pleased to be here with you.
And hi, I'm Bruce Maas, retired CIO from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. I've been the CIO at 3 different institutions. I've also worked in other parts of the organization. I've been a chief budget officer, and I've been a PeopleSoft project manager. I've also been the board chair of EDUCAUSE and board members of One EdTech and the Unison Consortium. I'm a data guy. I was known as the data guy, or among the data guys and the data gals at University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, and introduced the first ETL project when we implemented PeopleSoft in the late 1990s, and had experience working with that. I've also created one of the first chief data officers in higher education and launched a data governance institute. And I go all the way back to mounting magnetic tapes, for any of you might have gone back that far, and loading them on and doing data extracts. Looking forward to having a conversation with all of you. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Bruce and Mike, for the intros. Harrison, can you go to the next slide, please? All right, Rob and I just wanted to do a quick call out to a few links here. We have linked, you can use the QR code, and there's the link there as well, to the Databricks University Alliance program. We have over 700 faculty worldwide and get a wealth of benefits, and including an online community experience, getting started guides, sample notebooks, and compute credits. And then we also wanted to put the QR code here to the white paper that we're going to be referencing throughout this webinar. So grab those. And then also, yes, thanks, Rob. There's another link at the bottom that was cut off if you want to check out kind of the full suite of resources we have for higher education. Rob posted the link there in the chat. And then really quickly, before we get started with the questions, yes, please use the Q&A. We'll be moderating that. Rob and I will be moderating that throughout. And then also to the chat, we'll post any resources as we can while we're asking our panelists the questions. Cool. Well, let's get started. So this first question is for both of you, Mike and Bruce. So the topic of data is not new. So through your decades of experience as a CIO for universities, could you provide a quick overview of data use in IT, like what's new, what's not, and maybe some lessons learned through a success and a failure? Why don't we start with you, Mike?
I'll start, and then we'll let Bruce jump in because he is the data person. But you know, for me, much of my experience with data, frankly, over the last 25 years has been frustrating. You know, when I started in my role, there was this theory that you'd have one massive system and you put all the data in one system, and that way you would assure it was consistent and that everyone would have access and you could control the access appropriately. Now, my background's in computer science, so building big monolithic systems never seemed like a great idea, but that was the theory at the time, and so that was the beginnings of the PeopleSoft and SAP and the early Banner and other systems that you know, we'll have this one authoritative system, we'll put all the data in it, and then we can report on it accurately. And it was clear from the beginning that this never really worked. What happened was you put the data in one place, then people immediately pulled the data out to use it for their own purposes. So you ended up with shadow data systems all over campus. And the reason was that IT could almost never respond to the disparate and dynamic needs of a campus. The idea was, well, we'll ask everybody every report they ever want to build, and we'll build all those reports and we'll be done. And of course, that was never successful. And so data management was based on the assumption of scarce resources, slow processors, expensive databases, putting everything in third normal form in traditional databases, very expensive to manage, very slow to manage. And so there was this constant tension between, well, this is the way IT does it. We're going to have it all in this one place and have one management and one report generation tool to rule them all. And it never was very successful. And so I think that the explosion of interest in First of all, user tools for managing data, and what the cloud has brought to the way the options to manage data and the massive processing and storage that you have available in the cloud has enabled a completely different way to look at it. And I think Databricks is right on the cutting edge of that. Bruce?
Yeah, if I can build on that, the question is what's new? Well, the need to manage both unstructured and structured data is not new. That's been in place for as long as I have been involved. I really come out of the end user community, and its access to data has always been a challenge. Data has historically, from my perspective, been a bit of an afterthought. We went through that big wave, as Michael said, with enterprise systems. And, you know, the focus was on the successful implementation of the enterprise system. And data was a little bit of an and by and large driven by the business side of the organization. Ultimately, users will get what they need. And the question is, will that happen securely? Will that happen with adherence to privacy requirements? I'll give you an example. At one of the universities I worked, there was a tech guy in the controller's office, and I've never seen a person use Excel spreadsheets for doing so much for assembling data, moving it around. But I also was a bit horrified to understand all that stuff was on his laptop computer, all that data. He would take his laptop computer home, etc. And the new systems, I think, such as Databricks, the new infrastructure allows for us to be able to address secure and private access to data, allows us to implement data governance, even if you haven't developed data governance. Databricks, for example, has tools within it that allow you to do what I call data governance light, and to be able to implement your data governance at the same time if you don't already have it. And that is a big improvement. And the other thing I want to just touch on is that within higher education institutions, there's some cultural barriers for getting access to data. So any infrastructure that makes it easier, for example, for me as a CIO to be able to get the cooperation of, it's not just the registrar, but it could be the housing director, where I might want data where they have their own systems in place there. What you're looking for is infrastructure that allows you to do that and not let the cultural issues get in the way. And tools like Databricks allow that to happen.
I guess for Bruce and Mike, I think I have told this story one too many times, but not to this particular audience. So last summer, the 3 or 4 of us and some others were sitting in a conference room in San Francisco, and it just hit me. I'm like, Mike is a musician. Bruce has a life outside of technology, yet you're here participating in a discussion. What is it that excites you about the discussion? In other words, why do you think that we are at a turning point? In terms of what you've been trying to do over the last 20 years versus what you think is possible now with the data intelligence platform and storing structured and unstructured data. They were in the room voluntarily. They were retired. They didn't have to be there, yet they were still excited.
Sure, I'll pick that one up again, Rob. Going back to what we were talking about, I think if you look at IT leaders, if you were to kind of create a caricature of 2 approaches to IT, there's the approach that says, we're IT, we're going to own it all, we're going to keep it all in one place, and we'll let you have access to it if we want to let you have access to it. So there's this kind of very controlling approach. I think Bruce and I were both very user focused, and we were like, well, we want you to have the data if it's appropriate and if we can secure it. We want you to be able to solve your own problems. We're not trying to be the IT of no. And but unfortunately, a lot of the traditional systems were really designed in a way that didn't make it easy to give users what they wanted. I mean, ask yourself, why do you have shadow systems? It's not primarily that people want to have all the data on their laptop. It's that they're trying to solve a problem and they need access to that data to solve the problem. And we traditionally have not had the tools to make it easy to let people solve those problems. Tools, Databricks and other similar tools, but Databricks in particular, in my opinion, make it possible for you to do that. You can have the data, you can control it, you can manage it, you can govern it, you can secure it, and the users can solve the problems, right? This just hasn't existed before in my experience for a large enterprise, especially one as complicated as a university. It just wasn't there before. And so it was like, oh my goodness, we can actually do these things that we wanted to do. We can actually let users serve themselves the data, solve the problem, and not have it on their laptop, right? So that's number one. The other huge change is that the new advent and the new interest in AI has made it clear that data is a tremendously valuable asset in ways that we just don't even understand yet. And the traditional approach of put the data in a traditional relational database on a machine on-prem doesn't work for those who are working in AI. They need data lake type environments with large amounts of data from multiple sources. And so we're kind of creating these new shadow systems for the AI folks where we just have to extract all the data and give it over to the data scientists so they can manage it. Well, that's not ideal either, because now we've got to make sure the data scientist is an expert in security, and we've got to make sure the data is aligned and it's up to date and they're working on the right version and all that. If we can have an environment where our data scientists, our analysts can work together from the same data, that's what we really want. And again, Databricks is a master at that, because Databricks was really built on technology that was designed for generating AI models. So you can, to have one environment where we can do everything from the most basic report that HR perhaps needs on a daily basis, or that your dean of students or your chair of computer science needs a report of, what students are what class. And then you got your data scientist who's over there figuring out, why are students being successful and how do we attract the right students to admissions? And they're working with the same data. Again, this was not possible 10 years ago, and it is now. So to me, that's really exciting.
So, Bruce, I will ask you to respond, but there's one particular 3-word phrase which I have burned in my head from hearing you talk over the summer. So I'll turn it over to you, but I'll see if that 3-word phrase gets covered.
Well, where I was going to go with this, Rob, is after Michael's comments, is to talk about the infrastructure itself and the expense and the brittleness of the infrastructure. Is what I've experienced throughout my career is that in a cost-conscious organization, and I guess that's pretty much every organization, right, is you've got to look at what does it cost to do certain things. And the past has been a lot of different point solutions that get glued together. I go back to the time when every ETL was written with SQL, and with SQL, then you had all the expense of writing this code. Every time something changed, you had to go back to the code to change the code. And the infrastructure now makes it far more easier. And it also does it with the magic words that Rob put in of no vendor lock-in. It's very challenging when you have a series of products and the vendor basically is the only one that can provide you with solutions on data warehouses. We had many many experiences with vendors where they would promise us things, and in one case with a learning management system that we had, it was promised for a data warehouse to be able to last for the data warehouse to be able to be useful. What we had to be able to do was do our own work, and we had to do it with other vendors because our vendors wanted us to be able to use their solution, and that's not optimal from a cost viewpoint. What you want to do is change directions so that you don't have to swap out whole amounts of infrastructure, like to be able to get access to your data, and that's just a huge benefit to the Databricks platform.
So we had so if we had a time machine, or if you were requested to go back to your job, and it can be either Mike and Bruce or Mike or Bruce, if you went back to your old university and you had a 40-hour-a-week job to make some change or do a project, knowing the tools at hand, Databricks and others, knowing the things you just mentioned, what's the first thing you would tackle? If you just had 40 hours a week and some resources, what would you go back and tackle?
Well, first, it's hard to imagine working 40 hours a week in IT, regardless of your role.
Sorry, that's true.
So that's kind of throwing me a little bit. You know, it's the question is what I would always want to know what the institution needs, and that could vary from institution to institution. But you know, information security is going to be an issue anywhere you go today, at a level that just exceeds anything that we've seen before. In providing an excellent user experience is always something that I'm passionate about for users at every level, supporting the education mission of the institution, and access to data. I mean, this is every place I've gone, we've said, we want to be a data-driven institution. Now, sometimes you find out they don't really want to be a data-driven institution. It's merely a buzzword. But if the institution does want to be data-driven or data-informed, I think is a better term, then getting access to the data is critical. And my experience, it's been really hard, as Bruce says, in a cost-constrained area. We built these traditional data warehouses, and in my experience, by and large, for most institutions, they were too expensive and they underperformed. They didn't solve the problem that they were intended to solve. And so you know, if I could go back and say, you know what, I'm going to take inspiration from Bruce, and now I'm going to be the data guy, working with data lakes and working with flexible ways to collect, combine, and extract the data is just a hugely interesting and exciting opportunity that, again, it's just it seems like so much more fun than what it was 20 years ago, even 10 years ago.
And Rob, I don't really need to envision going back, because I had done that near the end of my career. I had been given, when I was hired, we had 5-year contracts, and I was given a set of 6 different things I needed to accomplish within that 5-year period. And one of them was to enable the University of Wisconsin to become a data-driven institution, because that's where our mission partners were leading us. And for me, the real breakthrough there, and I didn't really understand it, otherwise I wouldn't have avoided it till the very end of my career in dealing with, was that the community was very motivated to understand what those issues were, especially related to privacy and to security, and getting some way or another, figuring out how to get people together in governance. And we were very careful, I was very careful, not to put data governance strictly on the portfolio of the CIO. I pulled it out of IT governance and made it a broader category and worked in partnership with the chief business officer. And with, so to me, the key becomes helping a community to understand, to get what they need. There's a certain investment that's needed in infrastructure, and then you have to make that case and fit it in, and show them what the tangible benefits. And frankly, cybersecurity just really, really concerned me about having this data laying all over the place. And so once I was able to communicate that, without blame, right? But as a partner to the community, they were able to grasp that and support this concept.
We've got a good question in the Q&A, so maybe we can jump over to that one. Chris is asking, how do you see data architecture, transformation, and AI improving digital accessibility for customers, employees, faculty, parents, and students?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. And I'm glad for your comment that you added after that in the chat, because it makes me clear that because accessibility can mean a lot of things in a lot of contexts. It just mean how do you get access to the data, but then digital accessibility in the sense that it's accessible based on the needs of the individual, and including things like visual impairment or other specific needs that people might have. I think that, first of all, let me talk about just access to data in that sense of accessibility. And as we've talked about before, a good data architecture and the tools that are available today enable you to allow a higher degree of role-based accessibility than you've ever had before. Because you talk about customers, employees, faculty, parents, students. Clearly, you have different data that you want each group to have access to, and it could vary over time, and it could be quite complex. Managing that manually, creating separate data stores for different groups is very cumbersome. It's very hard to keep the data consistent. So having data governance that's going to enable you to manage the data from a central location and determine who has access to what, to log it, to manage the security of it, is, I think, the only hope you really have of making all the data accessible to everybody. But now when you bring in AI and you look at accessibility in terms of WCAG, Section 508 accessibility, in that sense of the word, I think realistically AI is the only hope. We have, at the institutions I've been at, we've spent a lot of resources to try to train people to create alt tags for their PowerPoints and their other materials. We've put money into generating captions, and we've used services that do that. The ability of AI to process language and to process images has gotten so much better. I mean, there was a time when it was like, oh, well, you wouldn't want to use an AI to describe an image because it would do such a poor job. Well, go into the modern tools in Microsoft and stuff, and it has the ability to automatically generate alt tags for images. A lot of tools do now. Canva does that. And it's pretty darn good. And, while I would say that having the individual who created the image personally create an alt tag for each image is probably the best solution, because you can get the highest quality. If you look at the number of images that your institution produces, if you look at how busy the people are, you're at a community college, you probably have a lot of part-time faculty. They're not, frankly, not being paid a ton. So to tell them, well, it's your job to describe every image that you put on the screen with text, that's asking a lot. AI can do an awfully good job, and asking people like, well, use AI to generate it and then take a look at it, so make sure it's not totally off base, I think is more realistic. So I think AI does create an opportunity. I think you're going to continue to see more and more AI incorporated into all kinds of tools, including ed tech tools, in a way that's going to improve the accessibility situation. So I'm a kind of agnostic at AI. I would say I'm neither a promoter nor a detractor. Depends on the use, and we need to be thoughtful about it. I think that thoughtful use of AI to improve accessibility is a great opportunity.
That was really comprehensive. I really don't have much to add to that, other than through my vantage point on working with the publishing industry through my role on IMS Global, which is now One Ed Tech. We've had a lot of conversations, and I would only add this is for the industry that supplies solutions such as Databricks. I think there's a lot to be said for understanding stakeholder interests. And for example, there are organizations like the National Federation of the Blind. And while a lot of our conversations have started out in an adversarial way, in part because of frustration, that legitimate frustration that community has to being able to get equal opportunity, equal access to education in particular, I think we have an opportunity to reach out to those advocacy groups and to be able to try and find out, what are their needs. And so as additional capabilities get developed, I think we need to be in dialogue, and that creates the greatest ecosystem. There's a lot of talent in that community that we would be missing if we didn't have them engaged with us. So I think it's worthwhile to be able to reach out to them and try and figure out what are the needs that they're seeing. Where are we falling short? The thing is the comment was on, I lived a lot of that with the challenges with alt tags and things. And the thing is, none of this was ever really architected from the beginning. And so taking an architectural approach to solving problems that you understand, that you've gained through listening and talking with different communities, I think is very important.
Thank you, Bruce. Thanks, Mike. Karen?
Yes, sorry. All right. So another question for you all is, many institutions are at a junction with the evolution of their use of data and analytics to achieve their goals. So according to the 2023 EDU Cause Review Top 10 IT Issues article, 4 of the top 10 issues involve data and analytics. So as an example, they identified data should be used around improving the student experience and or student enrollment. So based on both of your experiences, what are some specific data-driven practices universities have implemented that demonstrably improved student success and engagement, leading to higher enrollment?
I'm going to let Bruce start this time.
So I think I'll take this, is that we were going back a couple decades, actually. This whole discussion of student success was very, very prevalent in higher education institutions. And what I think a lot of university presidents and provosts discovered is that the infrastructure available on the campus really didn't give them what they needed. For example, we always used, at one of the universities I worked, we used the shorthand that if we could just retain an additional 100 students, it would be worth $1 million to us, right, in terms of revenue. And so not having to recruit new students, just retaining the students you have. And so there was a company that came along, and as a service, as a consulting service, they would embed within an organization, and they would indicate that provosts and presidents don't really need to have their IT people do this, that they, with their own access to data, this company could come up and set up its own SHAP system, frankly, that would give the student success data, and it worked really, really well. And I will tell you, there were a lot of institutions in the country that went that route. The challenge is, well, first of all, it introduced a problem, right, for the long term, and that is marginalizing the IT staff, indicating you don't need them involved. I had the direct experience of watching one university and the IT people telling me they were locked out of this process. And then once the business side started moving down this path, all of a sudden they reached out in a panic to the IT people because, of course, they realized at this point you need your IT people to be able to work with you. And so it introduced an unhealthy, I think, dynamic. Whereas a better approach, I think, would be the addressing the infrastructure and the architecture of the infrastructure so that the IT people can facilitate the mission partners, right? The business side of the organization, and the business of higher ed is academics, and to provide them, with the tools to be able to do what they need to do without having a recurring annual budget line that you need to pay to an outside company to be able to, help you with your student success. And so I think we're on the brink of universities don't want to let that go because it's been working. If you take my shorthand, 100 students equals $1 million. No one wants to mess with that. And so you end up with a certain amount of lock-in there, and it's not good financially for the institution in the long haul. A better approach is to have something that's architected.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, Bruce, I mean, there's also a lot of promises that weren't kept by that industry, aside from trying to force IT out. And that's part of the reason why folks on campuses came back to IT and said, well, this is data and this is technology. You must know how it works, even though they were told that you didn't need IT to do it. So it's a common story. I think we can find other examples where that's been tried. But in the end of the day, having the right architecture on campus that lets people solve their problems, whether they're student success problems or enrollment management or student recruitment, that's the gold standard. That's what you as IT want to provide for the campus, and finding the right partners that'll let you do that and work with you is what you want on a campus.
Bruce, I remember over the summer you talking also about piloting, and as we were talking about the accessibility issue and then this particular student enrollment issue, one of the things that a technology like this allows is the ability to, within the proper governance and proper architecture, to do pilots. And in particular, Bruce, when you talked about the cybersecurity issue, it was involving people across campus so that everybody was bought into that model. So that doesn't go away. There's no technology that makes that sort of, that social work go away in terms of involving stakeholders outside of IT across campus. But the barriers between the idea, the collaboration, and rolling out a pilot, they might be an order of magnitude or two less if you set the architecture and the governance right up at the beginning. So that's pretty exciting. So I'll ask the next question from the perspective of, I'm on your board of trustees. I donate a lot of money to the university. I've got a 22-year-old who's a senior, and AI this and AI that and large language models, and I'm really worried, and will they be able to get a job, and how is this changing the university? And I would like answers right now. So how would you respond to that sort of sideswipe approach?
I'd say, well, I'm just the IT guy. Let me ask the president to answer that question. But I think that there's really at least two different questions that are related, but they're not exactly the same thing. And they're, what are both the opportunities and the challenge for the institution created by AI? And then there's, what do we teach students for a world in which AI is going to really change the nature of the work that people do? To my mind, that's the toughest question, right? And I don't think anyone has an easy answer because it involves making assumptions about what the future will bring. So I'm not even going to touch that one right now. I think it's the most interesting question, but it's probably outside the scope. I'm not sure that Databricks can help solve that problem per se. But as far as what are the opportunities for and the challenges for the institution, I think it's been really interesting over the last 2 years to see institutions by and large go from the first panicked response to ChatGPT. ChatGPT appeared to come from nowhere to a lot of people. Now, those of us who know people in AI and have worked with it know that that's not really true. It was really much more of an evolutionary tool, but it just captured the imagination in a certain way at a certain time. And the response from a lot of institutions was panic. It was like, wow, this sort of breaks all the assumptions around what we do. And if we give these sort of, frankly, in my opinion, inane writing assignments to students, they can have ChatGPT do it for them. How am I going to force students to do those same inane writing assignments that I was always giving them? I think it's moved from that panic to, wow, this is something really interesting. This is a change in how writing works. This is a change in how information is presented. This is a new opportunity. It very much reminds, for those of us who've been around long enough, it reminds me of Google, right? It's like, well, what am I going to teach the students if they can Google the answer, right? Well, I mean, can you imagine now saying, there are not very many instructors right now who are saying, you're not allowed to use Google in this class. I'm sure there is somebody somewhere, but that's not, because people realize you can't do it and you don't want to do it. You want to learn how to learn with the tools that you have. And Google and search is a revolution in knowledge. It's a completely different way to think about what you know and how you use what you know. And I don't think, in my opinion, I'm not sure AI is quite at that level yet, but I think it's maybe where search was when Alta Vista was I'm just throwing that for Rob because he would remember that, and Bruce, when, before Google. I think we're actually still before Google in AI. We haven't quite gotten to where it's a utility like Google became in 20 years ago or so. So all that being said, I would say to the person, we're doing a great job. Keep giving us your money because we've got all these experts and people who are working on AI. But I just don't know. I think it's tough. I think it's really tough for institutions right now.
And Rob, when generative AI really came onto the scene in force, really about a year or so ago, I watched a lot of university presidents and provosts just kind of want to know what in the heck's going on, what do we need to do? And my biggest fear with generative AI is that every single business pocket at a university, whether it's your PR people, your student people, your business people, are going to try and find a way to utilize generative AI. And if they don't do it strategically, if they don't do it with an architected based approach, you're going to end up with an even worse mess. And so I just think that architecture is so important to being able to try and keep a university on the same page, create a community of knowledge where they can share with each other. What are you doing? What are you doing? I mean, generative AI can be used for so many things to improve the business, but it has to be a serious, integrated conversation on a campus, in my view.
Agreed.
We had a question pop up in the chat from Doran, and I have to admit, I had to read the question about 5 times to make sure that I'm understanding the question thoughtfully and properly. What are tech companies practically doing, best practices, to overcome the non-tech challenges facing AI adoption within higher education? I think most of the conversation we've had today has been related to best practices for overcoming non-tech challenges. facing lakehouse adoption, facing, just pick a technology term and put it in there, which is basically realizing that IT is not just, its own ivory tower. IT needs to collaborate with business units across campus, come to common agreement on what desirable outcomes are for the institution. We don't want to increase student enrollment through the roof if facilities is not prepared, et cetera, et cetera. So I think those challenges are still very common, and any iteration or improvement of technology requires that same sort of collaborative thinking. AI in particular, it's been interesting to sit on the tech side, and I think for Bruce and Mike, the last, I think, 3 to 6 months have been really interesting internally to the company. When you look at a data science notebook like Databricks that runs on public cloud resources, it's an end-to-end toolkit for a data team to take an idea and some data and then bring it forth into some positive value to the business. So that's the whole goal those teams exist. It's to create business value inside of a corporation. There's a cost in terms of building the stack and the solution. What's interesting, and you alluded to this hitting a tipping point with ChatGPT and generative AI, the models have become good enough, the approaches have become good enough to where we're saying, oh, there's a whole new realm of business value that's possible because of the existence of these tools. Now, what I'm seeing now from the tech side is, how do we segment or parse different types of models for different types of purposes so that you're minimizing cost and maximizing business value? And in this case, it would be maximizing business impact for the university. So just one specific example is retrieval augmented generation, where we're saying you can have a big general model, but it's going to have some hallucinations at some point. How do we tie that large multi-purpose model to a specific corpus of data or information so that we can get the general answers, but then when it's in a particular realm of expertise, I don't know, law research, it can enhance the answer that you get with a very specific set of clear hierarchical data. And that to me is exciting, because now what we're seeing is commercial approaches being based on what's the size of the model that they want to build, how much data do they have. And I think right now, off the top of my head, there's 3 general tiers. And maybe if it's a small bespoke model, that's one thing. If you want to build a more general model, then you're taking some open source things into account. And then what we're seeing now is the closing of the window on large universally used general purpose models, copyright, ethical fair use, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a bit of a rambling answer, but I love the question, because AI adoption is evolving, but the core challenges of basically talking about return to the, return on your investment, or how much is it impacting the mission of your organization, those are still there. Those don't go away. And what you'll see over the next 3 to 6 months is a rapid evolution of tools to where what we talked about 6 months ago versus what we'll talk about in 6 months, you'll just see whole ecosystems and tool sets and SDKs, if you want to call them, built out. So it's pretty exciting. And I think, just the example of using AI to auto tag, PowerPoint for Section 508 purposes, fantastic. I mean, that to me feels a lot better than, yet another video game on my phone. So anyway, talking too much. Back to Bruce and Mike.
Yeah, let me follow up on that, Rob. My first response was to the question, what are tech companies doing to solve the non-tech challenges, was nothing. But that isn't really fair to companies like Databricks that are actually very thoughtful about. I think Databricks is a great example because it's built on this platform of a data science notebook, that it's always been about the interface between people and machines, right? Databricks was built exactly to do that, to let the people who are analyzing data have better access to the data. It's not a company that's about having AI collect all the data and solve the problems for you. It's about a tool that's going to help you solve the problems better. There's a lot of companies, and ed tech is rife with them, that are just that see AI as this gold rush, and if they just create a product and say that it has AI in it, they can convince people to buy it. I think that's true anytime you have a new technology, and unfortunately, not everybody thinks about these things in an ethical and human-focused way. And I think caveat emptor to everybody, look at what it is that you're getting and ask those questions like, how is this going to change the way people work with the data? How is it going to change the way people work with the technology? So there are good ethical companies. I think especially ones that have been working in AI for a while, and I can think of other companies as well, that really have already figured out a lot of this stuff, and they've already made the mistakes of trying to use AI as a solution rather than as a tool. As you, Doran, look at, I'm sure people are banging on your door and saying, I have the latest and greatest AI tool. I think that's a great question to ask them, and say, so help me understand how your tool is going to help me with the folks in my institution use it. What is the tool going to do to make it appealing for people to use it in my institution? And I think a lot of them are going to say, but it's AI. You don't need people to do it. AI will do it for you. I would walk away from those organizations. And thanks to the pointer to the community in Virginia. I got that up in my web browser. I look forward to checking it out later.
So Bruce, anything to add? I think we're 5 minutes left. Appreciate the questions from Chris and Doran and the discussion. I just want to make sure that if anybody else has any burning questions, that we answer or at least talk about them before we wrap it up.
Yeah, I think Mike captured that well in the follow-up to your comments, Rob. So I think let's see what other questions we have for the remaining part of the time.
And Mike, I appreciate the shout out to Databricks. We have an active team focused on external communications about our approaches to AI, which means that there are experienced lawyers and experienced field engineers having in-depth conversations about what we as a company should do when it comes to, what are the borders of ethical behavior in AI. And that to me is the most encouraging thing, mostly because I know them personally and they're fantastic individuals. But it's also not, the AI is not a conversation that's happening in a vacuum. It's happening in the context of public policy, in the context of societal and cultural ethics. I'm just about to hit.
Rob, I would just add that.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, Rob. I would only add that this is generative AI is an extremely powerful tool, and what a concern I have moving into the future is ethical issues, right? Because these things can be misused as well as used. And so in addition to having, well-architected solutions, I think there's an opportunity here, not only for universities, but for companies to help re-educate about ethical uses, right? Somehow our community has to be in active participation in discussion about the ethics, because we know that individuals who live a crime-based existence will take advantage of everything that they possibly can. And it's really up to us to help figure out how can we put some guardrails on this so that it remains a positive force, not a negative force.
Absolutely. Things will continue to iterate and evolve. We cannot say we have solved this, let us move on. It is constant vigilance and dialogue, which I think is that's just part of a participatory democracy in many ways. Karen, Bruce, Mike, any closing comments? Andrew, if not, I'm just going to turn it over to Harrison.
Good.
Sounds good.
Awesome. If no one has anything else to say, I want to thank all of our presenters for all this awesome conversation that we had. And I'd also like to thank all of you for joining us today. We hope that you found this webinar informative and helpful to you and your organization and institution.